It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, like a hometown commander. We are back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I, and Andrew in this case, brew our version 1.0 deck list for the commander in front of us on our quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel. For anyone new to Millsy Brews, it's the show where we bring forward our deck list for you. I go card by card explaining the strategy and the connections in between them. If you're not interested in an explanation, you just want to see the deck list, it'll be down in the description for you. Let me know what you think down in the comments, but otherwise, let's jam into it. We're looking at Rocco Street Chef today, and this is a commander that I'm not surprised at all that Andrew is interested in, but I think his list is really cool for this commander. I think he did a really great job, and I think it encapsulates probably a great mix of all the value we can just shove in a deck like this to just make every card impactful. Rocco Street Chef, red, green, white for a 2/4 elf druid. At the beginning of your end step, each player exiles the top card of their library. Until your next end step, each player may play the card they exiled this way. And then whenever a player puts a land from exile or casts a spell from exile, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and create a food. So first ability is going to, on our end step, everyone's going to exile the top card of their library, and anyone can play a land or cast their spells from exile, and then whenever anyone does, including us, we get a counter and a food. So I like Rocco because Rocco's kind of interesting, right? The first ability is kind of like Prosper, right? Where we're exiling a card and we can use that card later. And then our second ability is kind of like Prosper in a way because we're getting a value from the things that we play from exile, getting a counter and a food token as opposed to a treasure, right? With Prosper. So this is a very similar concept, but we're caring about different things. And I think the +1/+1 counter feels a lot more Naya, right? It feels a lot more Naya than the treasure feeling a lot more Rakdos. And I like the food token as well. This gives us two options. It gives us the +1/+1 counter synergy. It gives us the artifact synergies as well. So we have options. We have a lot of options as far as what we can do. And Andrew's done a pretty good job at splitting this list between caring about +1/+1 counters, caring about exile cards, and caring about food. Like, I think he's done a pretty good job at sitting this all across. But of course, +1/+1 counters are a strategy. They have a lot of cards, and I think this is where he's put a primary amount of it. But you can really spread this out, and that's what I like that he's done. Mana base looks pretty solid. You got a great mix of the shock lands and the pain lands. Gavany Township's a great like little utility land choice because we can put a counter straight on everything, which is great. Sunhome, a great utility land here, giving something double strike. We're playing the new Drannith Ruins to put two +1/+1 counters on a non-human creature at the end of the battlefield this turn. That's not a bad ability considering, again, +1/+1 counters have so many synergies we can take advantage of. Well, let's get into the enchantments. And I think as far as our strategies go, I think we're playing two signpost enchantments that show you exactly what we're trying to do. The first is All Will Be One from Phyrexia All Will Be One. Whenever you put one or more counters on a perimeter player, it deals that much damage to target opponent, create creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. Well, here we go. We want to put counters on things. All That One completely pays that off in letting us damage our opponents whenever we put counters on things. There are a lot of cheeky combos with All That Would Be One, and I don't think I saw him play them. So we're trying to avoid some of the sneaky combos, but I like it. I think this is just one of those value cards that over the course of the game is we're just putting counters on our things. Because remember, when our opponents play things, we get counters as well. I love it. We're just going to put counters on them. We're going to deal chip damage. I feel the same way about Passionate Archaeologist, right? Commander creatures you own have whatever you cast a spell from exile. This creature deals damage equal to its spell's mana value to target opponent. Well, this is great as well, right? Because when we're playing our things at exile, now we're damaging our opponents as well. Now, the restriction is we'd have to have Rocco out, which, why wouldn't we? Rocco's the thing that we want out all of the time, right? It's the main portion of all of our value. It's where we're getting all of our value from. So, the only downside to Passionate Archaeologist over All Will Be One is that Passionate Archaeologist requires Rocco in the battlefield, whereas All Will Be One would work without it. And we have other ways to put +1/+1 counter things, of course, besides Rocco. But I think Passionate Archaeologist has such a high ceiling depending on what you can cast with it. And Andrew's picked some great choices when we get up top on creatures and spells that we can cast from exile that are going to get us a lot of damage. Hardened Scales Seems only right in a +1/+1 counters deck, right? 1 mana extra +1/+1 counter anytime you put a counter on something. Killer Service seems like a great choice. Making foods equal to the number of opponents we have. At the beginning end step, we can pay 2 and sacrifice token if we do create a rhino. So this gives us another use for our food, right? We get a bunch of foods, we can use the food for 3 life, but Killer Service says, hey, at the beginning of our end step, we can just pay 2 mana and get a rhino out of our food, which isn't bad either. I mean, when we want to go wide or do some blocking, or, there's plenty of ways that we can use those tokens to our advantage. Showdown of the Scald seems like a perfect choice for a deck like this. This is a card that I had so much fun playing in Arena at the time it existed, and in Standard at the time it existed, and I really love this card. I wish it got more play, because for a deck like this that even half cares about playing things out of Exiles, Showdown of the Skulls is perfect for it. So in the first Saga step, you exile the top 4. Then your next turn you can play those cards. So you can play lands if you get them, or spells, and then 2 and 3 say whenever you cast a spell this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Friends, that doesn't care about the spells you exiles. That's just whenever you straight cast a spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. I love this because now we can stack up on certain creatures and we can really take advantage of those +1/+1 counters. We got Smothering Tithe, of course, treasures. Smothering Tithe is a staple, and it's a staple for a reason, because treasures go a really long way in helping us with mana production and helping us ramp forward. It's funny that I think Rustic Study used to get a lot of hate, a lot more hate than it does now. But it's funny that Smothering Tithe has joined it for that. Hey, are you going to pay the 2, or are you going to do this? But I love Tithe. At least it's 4 mana and gives you the opportunity to get out from underneath it. And what's kind of funny most of the time about Smothering Tithe and Rustic Study by extension is they ended up just eating removal. And that's okay. You don't mind that, because it takes the removal away from maybe one of your pieces that you really need, as opposed to that thing. And the Trail of Crumbs seems great, since we're dealing with the food. Whenever it comes in, you create a food token. And then whenever you sacrifice a food, you may pay 1. You do look at the top 2. You can get a permanent, put it in your hand. So I like this because we have plenty of other ways to sacrifice food, except just by paying 3 life and, the 2 mana and tapping it and getting the 3 life. So for any of our abilities, if we sacrifice a food, we could pay 1, look at the top 2, and get something in our hand. Trail of Crumbs is a well-known card for those food strategies. I like it. The only thing I'd like to see here in the enchantment slot is maybe something like an Invigorating Hot Springs or Rhythm of the Wild, to get some haste or some more plus encounters. But I like where we're going so far. We're getting a good mix, and I think that's the one thing that Andrew always excels at, I think, over me in deck building, is that he does a great job at making sure every card in every slot does something that is important to every parts of what he's trying to do. I tend to make a lot more focused decks, right? A lot of the decks I built for myself are a lot more focused. What I like about Andrew is he always does a good job at spreading things out and making sure that every card matters. Whereas I would just place a bunch of support cards that are great in slot for consistency. Andrew cares a lot more about making sure that every card in every slot is efficient for all of his strategies and making sure that they're all relevant. And I think the enchantments here show that. Getting up into our artifacts, Arcane Signet, Mox Amber, love the choice here. We're probably playing a lot of legendary creatures, so Mox Amber comes in a lot of handy. Soul Ring, 2 talismans, 4 mana rocks, Idol of Oblivion. Going to draw us a lot of cards, because we're going to be making a lot of tokens. We're going to be making a lot of food and a lot of other things. I like it. Inspiring Statuary, letting our artifacts tap to help us cast non-artifact spells. I like that. That feels great, right? We're going to have a ton of food laying around. We get to tap them. The KCI, Karkland Ire, where sacrifice an artifact had 2 mana. This makes a ton of sense, because obviously if we were making artifact creature tokens, we'd play Phyrexian Altar or Ashnod's Altar. And because we are making a lot of food, Karkland Ire's KCI makes a lot of sense, because now we can sacrifice those food for 2 mana. I really like it. Again, here's another example of a card that's just going to be better the more food we have. Ozolith has the Hardened Scales effect on the top, giving us an extra counter every time we add counters. And then for 2 mana, we can put a counter on artifact creature we control, or we could cycle it for 2 mana. I love the Ozolith. It's a fun rare, and I'm intrigued to see how this does. I haven't played too much with it yet, but, of course, I have played some with the original Ozolith. Whenever a creature leaves the battlefield, put the counters on the Ozolith in the beginning of combat. Put every counter on the Ozolith onto a creature. This is great because we've got some flyers or things like that. We can move that entire stack onto a flyer and just deal some great damage. Great Henge, who doesn't love the Great Henge? Whenever non-token creature comes in, you get a +1/+1 counter. You draw a card, taps for 2 mana. It's cheaper the bigger the creature you have. Great Henge is a green staple in my opinion and perfect for this deck. And then Trading Post. So it says discard a card, gain 4 life. We could pay a life to make a goat. We could sack a creature to return a target artifact from a graveyard to our hand, or we could sack an artifact to draw a card. So this probably makes the most sense for the last one, right? So we're going to have a lot of food lying around. I like it. Trading Post is a great card, has lots of utility, and I think that's a lot for this deck, especially, or good for this deck when you want to try to draw as much as you can. Okay, getting up into the spells. I see a good mix here. Conservation, ramp, and growth for some ramp. We have giant opportunity in our food strategy. You may sacrifice 2 foods. If you do, make a 7/7 giant. Otherwise, create 3 food tokens. I love it. This can turn some of the foods we already have into some fun things. Inspired tinkering. Playing some spells from exiles and we get some treasures for it. Perfect. And then damning verdict, destroy all creatures with no counters on them. Perfect. All right, well, we're trying to put counters on all of our creatures, so that makes a ton of sense. And then getting into removal, Beast Within, Nature's Claim, Plowshares for some removal. Silk Guard feels perfect in this deck because you can pay mana to put counters on them, or you can pay nothing and just 1 green, and all of your creatures that have equipment, auras, or counters on them just get hexproof until their turn. I love Silk Guard. This card I've been trying to play for a long time, and I think it's perfect for this one. Rebuff the Wicked. Counter target spell that targets permanent you control. That's great. 1 white mana protects our things. Same thing with that Nature's Claim. 1 green mana to get rid of something. Heroic Intervention to protect the board. Flawless Maneuver to protect just creatures for indestructible. And then Clever Concealment. One of my single favorite cards of the last 3 months as far as protection goes. If you have enough creatures to convoke this out, you can pretty much always just mini Teferi's Protection and protect your board. I love it. Delayed Blast Fireball. Perfect for a deck like this if we can cast it from exile. Deal a bunch of damage to our opponents. Deal a bunch of damage to their creatures. I love it. And then Boros Charm for some more protection. I like it. Andrew's starting to channel me here at the protection spells. Boros Charm, Clever Concealment, Flawless Maneuver, Heroic Intervention, probably like my top 4 in these colors of protection cards for a deck. And I think this deck wants all 4 of them. You want to protect as much as you can because board wipes happen. And the good part about this suite of protection is Flawless Maneuver, Heroic Intervention, and Boros Charm protect you from board wipes. They protect you from damage-based board wipes. They protect you from combat if need be. And then Clever Concealment is going to protect you from Cyclonic Rift. It's going to protect you from Mass Bounce. It's going to protect you from Mass Exile. I think Clever Concealment is my favorite answer for a card like Farewell because you pretty much just walk out of it clean, which is what you want. And so I think that Clever Concealment is important for that, whereas the rest of them are important for blocking if you need to block, but you don't want to lose your creatures. Board wipes. I think there's a bunch of other scenarios where all 4 of these protection spells do a lot of good, and that's why I will almost strictly run these 2 whenever I can, and I will always run Heroic Intervention when I can. Boros Charm is a mixed bag. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but again, perfect for this deck. I love it. Well, we don't have many Planeswalkers, which is not that much of a surprise. There's only a handful of Planeswalkers I could think that you would play in a deck like this, so we're going to get into the creatures. If you don't want to see me go through one by one through the creatures, deck list is down in the description. Let me know what you think, but let us rock through it. Academy Manufacturer. Well, this just makes sense, right? We're making the foods. Why not make a clue, a treasure, and a food? And we can take advantage of the extra things that we have, especially those treasures. Well, I love Apex Devastator. Here we go. 10 mana Cascade 4 times, 4 spells from exile. So with Rocco out, this gives us 4 triggers. None of that, it just gives us a massive 10/10 body for 10 mana. My favorite thing about Cascade, and I always try to mention this every time, is that remember that a Cascade trigger goes off whether you counter the spell or not. Whether you deal with Apex Devastator on the stack, you will still get 4 Cascade triggers for 10 mana. And considering, I think, all of our deck is underneath 10 mana, we're going to get 4 spells worth of good things for 10 mana. So I love Apex Devastator. Again, great for those Rocco triggers. Canker Bloom. Get rid of something, a proliferate, that's great. At minimum, this just gets rid of an artifact or enchantment. At maximum, we put an extra +1/+1 counter on everything that we have. Lambhold, here we go. Perfect choice for this deck. As the creatures come in, it gets more +1/+1 counters, and then nothing with power less than Champion Lambhold can block. We just get Champion Lambhold big enough, and then our opponents cannot stop us from running the game over. Commander Layara Porter, whenever you attack, spells you cast from exile this turn cost X less to cast, where X is the number of players being attacked, and then we exile the top X cards of your library, and then we can cast those spells. So this is great, right? Fits completely well. Get something into exile that we can play, and then makes them cost less. So the things we already had in exile cost less too. I love it. I was never 100% on the Aura Porter as a commander by itself, but here we go. Here's a perfect example of a place where we could play a Conclave Mentor, get that hardened skills ability again on a creature, and then whenever it dies, you gain life to its power. So +1/+1 counters are so good at getting so many instances of this hardened skills ability, and I love it. Defiler of Vigor, my boy is back from Dominator United. Whenever we cast a green permanent spell, we can pay 2 life instead of 1 of the green pips. And then whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Defiler of Vigor does such a good job at spreading +1/+1 counters out. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love this card, and I'm glad that they included that one. As for Sentinel for some draw, and of course the counter. Once the counters go on it, then it costs more and more for our opponents to try to pay to get out of it. I don't think it'd be a green red deck these days without Tali Primal Conqueror. This is a card that Andrew and I both love, and of course it plays things from exile, so it fits so much better. And I absolutely love this frame. I can't wait to see more cards in this Ixalan frame. But 7 mana, everybody exiles till they hit a non-land card. Cast all of them for free from exile. 4 Rocco triggers if all 4 players are still in the game, and a bunch of other stuff. I love a Tali Primal Conqueror. I love this card so much, and love seeing it here. He's also playing the other Tali, which makes a ton of sense. Whenever it attacks, each player exiles the top card. A little bit of a less chance of auto hitting, right? Primal Conqueror, make sure that you cast it on the exile and on that card. Primal Storm just hits the top card, but I think still often not, you're just going to get a ton of value from something like a Tali. Evolution Sage, proliferating whenever a land comes in. That's great. We're going to have a bunch of counters. We want to keep them going around. Here we go. Faldhorn, one of Andrew's decks that he really, truly enjoys. I think Faldhorn's a great sub-commander for a deck like this. Getting us tokens every time we cast something from exile. And then 1 into tap to exile the top card. And I think that's really important in a deck like this, because then we can get more cards into exile to play, right? That's the same thing that Lara Porter does, right? Get more things into exile for us to play so we could take advantage of them. Gilded Goose, Mana Dork, sack of food to get a mana of any color, or we can create food. Gilded Goose seems perfect for a deck like this, where we're just going to have a ton of food laying around, and Gilded Goose can use it to get us mana. The Apparition, whenever it deals coming damage to a player or Planeswalker, proliferate again, lots of +1/+1 counters. That's great. I like it. Get in there, especially with the 1/1 flyer. Incubation Druid, probably one of my favorite mana dorks if you can half guarantee a +1/+1 counter on it quickly, because then it turns into a 1 mana to a 3 mana dork. And Incubation Druid is great. I love it. Jahira, turning all of our tokens into tap, add a green mana. The best part about this ability, friends, is that it says tokens you control up tap at a green mana. It doesn't say creature tokens, which means this would turn all of these food we would get, or the clues we get from any academy manufacturer, into being able to tap for green mana. And that is massive. I think that helps us out a ton on certain turns. Kami of Whispered Ones, our new card from March of the Machine. Tap it to give us X mana, where X is its power. And I like this because it gives us, 1, another copy of the Hardened Scales effect, and number 2, it just going to get bigger the more counters we put on it. And the best part about Rocco is we choose where that counter goes. So I think this is never going to be a bad spot, considering we can get all of that mana from it. Lelia, great card for a deck like this. When it attacks, you exile the top card and you can play it this turn. And then whenever you exile 1 or more cards from a library in our graveyard, you put a counter on it. So it's going to get counters throughout our turns and throughout the turns when things get exiled. And then it's going to exile when we attack to potentially make it bigger. I like Lelia. It's a great attacker for a deck like this. Mondrak seems perfect, right? Doubling the tokens. It's a good 4/4 body. We can make it indestructible, which makes it a pretty great attacker as well, right? Think about it. You put counters on it, you make it indestructible, and now you have a 7/7, 8/8 indestructible. It's still going to be tough to deal with. PNLR seems great. Whenever we play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, we make a Thopter, and our Thopters have haste. I love it. This seems perfect for the deck. We're already casting out of exile anyway. Why not make some tokens in the process? Facebreaker feels great as well. Whenever one more creature we control deal damage to a player, we get a treasure. Sack a treasure out of the exile, the top card. We can play that card this turn. This is great because we're probably going to be getting treasures anyway. We have seems like enough ways to get them anyway, right? So use them to get things off the top and play things off the top. So now we're getting more Caster of Exile. We're doing more things. Rishkar, Pima Renegade. Whenever it enters the battlefield, put a counter on each of the 2 target creatures, and each creature with a counter on it has add a green. Here we go. Right now, all of our creatures with a counter on it tap for a green mana. This and Jaheira are both doing, I think, a similar role in this deck where it's like, oh, turn all of our creatures into mana dorks, not just the ones. Because, if we're trying to get a big spell like Apex Devastator down, now we can tip all of our creatures potentially for a green mana. Schlein Halar, here's our example of another fun card, just like kind of a second copy of All We Want. If you think about it, whenever one or more counters are put on a creature you control, it deals that much damage to target opponent. Now, All We Want can hit creatures and planeswalkers, whereas Schlein Halar can only hit opponents. But hey, here we go. We're going to be putting lots of counters down, or we're going to be trying to put lots of counters down. So Schlein Halar is going to spread that damage out to our opponents, or preferably go after one opponent or knock opponent out if need be. Tokens on spell at the beginning of combat. You may pay 1 and sack an artifact. If you do, make a construct with haste. We're going to have a ton of those food lying around. Pay 1, get a construct out of it. I love it. We're playing a Rabrask. The one from Capenna, because at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw a card this turn, instead they exile the top card of their library. They may play it this turn. So this is going to give us the ability to exile an extra card every turn that we can play, and for our opponents, they're going to have to do 1 per turn. I like it. Again, get things into exile, play them, get the benefit. I love it. Vorinclex, a card that Andrew and I have so much love for. Monstrous Raider, doubling the amount of counters we put on a permanent or player instead, and having the amount of counters our opponents put on their things. But this is great. It's going to turn our 1 counter from Rocco into 2, and so many of our other effects double them up. I love it. I love Vorinclex, and then it's just a great body. It's 6/6 Trampler. Wild Magic Sorcerer seems perfect for this deck. The first spell we cast from Exile each turn has Cascade. This is going to take the spells we're already trying to cast from Exile and give us the chance to just luck into something else from our deck. I love Cascade, and again, I wish we could have more of it in a deck like this, but I think we're playing a good amount so far. Xenagos, who doesn't love Xenagos, comes in as an enchantment if you don't have a devotion to 7 yet, and then at the beginning of each combat you give a creature +X in haste, where X is that creature's power. So the bigger that creature is, the better it becomes, and it gets haste. And Xenagos does that every turn, pumping things up and getting things in for combat. I love Xenagos, and in a deck like this where we're trying to put +1/+1 counters around, the creature doesn't have to need the haste to attack. If we have a Primal Conqueror that's already been out, or an Apex Devastator that's already been out for a turn or two, Xenagos just doubles it, and it's going to attack it, and it's doubled. So I like it. I like Xenagos, probably one of the most popular Gruul commanders of all time, and it fits so great here. And then Yoshit Dissident, whenever the artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on her creature control. Well, here we go, right? Now every time we make that food off of Rocco, we're getting an extra +1/+1 counter, and that makes a ton of sense. Well, friends, let me know what you think of Andrew's list down in the comments. I really like this one. I think he did, like I said, a really great job of balancing the counters and the food synergies. I think Rocco is a commander that's going to be really fun to see, and of course, I love it because it got that beautiful Art Deco gilded frame. That is my favorite from Capenna, so I love seeing it in this frame from March of the Machine. I hope we do more of these treatments soon. I hope we see these treatments come back, that it's not just a one-time thing, that we get to see so many of these things again, because I love a lot of these frames. Of course, we're going to see the Ixalan one again here in just a few months when we see Lost Caverns of Ixalan, but I love this Art Deco frame, and I can't wait to see more of it. But guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Like if you like the video, subscribe if you want to join us on our quest to help your favorite Magic channel. Like I said, let us know down in the comments what you think of the deck. I love having conversations with you guys about card choices and why things weren't picked or why things were picked. That's what makes brewing fun. That's what makes it fun to put these decks together. And of course, on these videos, if we get the right comments, I'll make sure Andrew gets on and responds to the people wanting to know about what he chose for some of his choices. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.